in the morning somewhere in the world, namely here in Santa Monica. It is great to be here. We're going to talk about investment. We're going to talk about startup. We're going to talk about all kinds of wonderful things. I'm going to bring in someone who I respect massively, who's one of the top growth hackers that I know, and we're going to dig deep into how do startups move forward. First thing I want to talk about, though, a lot of good stuff happening last week. One of our companies had a merger, which was a great merger, which I loved lots. And I'll talk a little bit about how that went through. Another very interesting thing happened. We had a VC that was going to go for a Series A, close out a Series A. It turned out that one of the companies that our company had that was just about to close out their Series A, they did not renew their contract. It was only a small amount of money. Our company did the right thing and they told the VC, and then the VC did the wrong thing and then they canceled their Series A. Now, that tells me a couple of things. Number one, it tells me that a lot of VCs are terrified. I'm trying to use the right word for this because I think actually my feelings are stronger, because I think when you have an entrepreneur who's going to tell you the truth and be very transparent about things, that entrepreneur needs to be embraced, loved, and you need to just thank them for being alive, because that's what we want to have in the market today. But VCs are terrified. They're so afraid. They're so worried about what's happening right now. The old model of like 1 in 10, 1 in 20 is not working. Companies are flailing everywhere. It's hard. And so it's really, really, really important as an entrepreneur to redouble down, refocus on all of the stuff that we've mentioned to you before over at Expert Dojo. It's just growth. Keep driving your customers, keep building your customers. Don't put all of your chips on the table of VCs. They're extremely unpredictable. We are extremely unpredictable right now. LP sources of money are not as strong as they used to. The VCs being sure of a deal is like so far away from the truth right now. And the only truth you have, the only thing that can actually help you and give you a chance to actually be able to become strong is the ability to bring in, is to be able to bring in really strong focus on your customers. So customer growth, build it, make it stronger, make it better. And that's where you got to go to. Another company did a merger. Now, is it a huge merger that's going to make them $1 billion company? No, but it's an extremely strong strategic merger that's going to allow them to overcome all of the growth issues that they were having on their own. 1 + 1 in many cases in this market equals 3 or 4 or 5. You just have to find your 1 + 1. And again, what that says is, rather than just keeping on going down the same road, smashing on the same wall, trying to break through on it, you don't have to do that. There are ways to break through. There are many other people that are facing really different challenges in the market today that you can actually help them with. So it is a really interesting time. We have a new president-elect coming in the US. We have markets which are getting more bullish for the first time in 3 years. We have customers who are hopefully going to start spending a little bit more money than they were before. And we have great things happening on the growth hacking side. So without further ado, hopefully this is enough reinforcement for you to realize that you need to listen to everything that Colby is going to be talking to you about today. Colby is one of my favorite growth hackers. His org have been with us pretty much since the start, have impacted so many of our companies in such a big way. And I love how his mindset is entirely focused on growth, and more growth. Welcome, buddy.
Thanks for having me on. Glad to join.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the stuff that you and me love talking about.
Yeah.
How do we just drive growth in startups? And I was just mentioning a little bit about the market right now. Like investment, we know is a mess. Investors, we know, are an even bigger mess. And the startup system, which was all about, let's just find somebody who'll invest in the company, get loads of money and spend that, hasn't been around for really 2-3 years. More and more companies are dying. I see them even inside our network, our companies. I see companies before who had like the greatest visions, the greatest missions, the greatest teams behind everything in the past. And now they're like, we don't have enough customers to sustain us. We miscalculated the cash flow model. Outside Expert Dojo, I'm seeing it happen on a way wider scale. So the really nice thing about all of this, even though there's a tragedy here with orgs and startups and companies that are kicking off, the really wonderful thing here is that actually it gets back to the customer, right?
Yeah, I think you said it very well in the intro there. I mean, I think the days of just taking on a lot of capital and then finding profitability down the road are past or coming to a close pretty quickly there. Funding can be very good, but it can also bring along a lot of things like bloat and just, loss of priorities and focus that way. I'm in the process actually of building and launching a software company related to marketing analytics. And that's one of the key things that we are focusing on early on, like you said, is that customer growth and that customer focus. So while we're in product dev, while we're looking at planning out our messaging, we are interviewing potential customers. We are getting on at least 2 to 3 calls a week and trying to understand what we can gain from what pathway does the decision making happen or flow for purchasing within their organization, and what priorities or jobs to be done are they trying to solve. So I think that is a key priority, and it's always been a fundamental, but just really understanding your customer and their needs and just really diving into that. Oh, I can't hear you now.
Sorry, you cannot hear me, right?
Now
You
I
can't
can.
hear me now. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. Oh, I like it. You put it in there. I just changed my virtual screen from my real screen, which is actually exactly the same
Yeah.
screen, but it's in real life. And it put me on mute. But look, you have a long, long, long history in growth hacking. Talk to us a little bit about kind of what you see as far as the environment today, as far as attracting customers, and maybe a little bit also about your org and kind of where you've come from and where you are. But then I would love to dig into kind of where you see the environment today attracting customers versus maybe where it was 3, 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah. So I own a digital marketing agency called Brighter Click. We've worked with startups specifically in the tech environment through 292 million in seed funding. So we've worked with them to help elevate their marketing as they've gone through those different series rounds. I think, where the market is today, it's interesting because if we're talking about software development in particular, with the advancements in AI, there is the potential for less barrier of entry to create a product or create a company now, right? It used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to build out a software company. Now you can do it for, potentially under 100K, depending on your product, under 20, 30, 40, 50K. And it used to be very, very important for a founder or the founding team to have dev experience so that they could move very quickly and execute. And I don't think that's a bad thing now, but I think it's becoming more and more of a priority for founders to have marketing background and marketing experience, because where on the e-commerce side of the world or the business industries, we've always talked about branding, and you need brand awareness and you need to establish a brand, Lululemon, Nike, those types of companies. I think it's becoming very important in 2024, 2025 and ahead for software companies to focus on brand. I was auditing a Google ad account for a very well-known automation software recently, and about 70% of their inbound from Google Ads comes from branded keywords. And they were actually in the process of trying to focus on getting away from just branded stuff. But I think with the ease of AI and with development cost shrinking for it to make a product, I think it's more and more important for brands or for software companies to focus on branding to differentiate themselves in the market. Because if everybody has the same features and everybody can easily put stuff out, there needs to be something that's really setting you apart there.
And by the way, not even just like B2B. I think B2B it becomes huge. B2B, it becomes it's like game stakes, right? Like you don't get to play on the poker table unless you have a great brand. We saw folks like Liquid. I was speaking at the Google Accelerator last week to their folks, and I said this exact same thing. Like if you have Liquid Death, that they were the fastest growing CPG brand on the planet, all brand, nothing special about their water that they have, but all about how they built messaging that helped people emotionally resonate with what they were building. We got folks like Beehive on the B2B SaaS side of it who are doing similar type stuff, like really, really powerful what they've built as well. And so that's game stakes. Like you have to build out really good branding. Talk to me about some of like the tactics that you really like using, or if you're an early stage startup company, how they should look at building out a really good brand from your perspective.
Yeah, I think starting with the voice of the customer. I mean, it sounds like such a fundamental, and you hear that and you say, okay, yeah, sure. But really focusing on interviewing as many customers as you can, understanding what problems they're trying to solve, understanding what would make them purchase one tool or another, their price sensitivity, the purchasing pathways within the organization, all of those things. And then aligning your messaging as well as you can to make sure that you fit that product market fit, and establishing 3 to 4 core messaging angles that you're going to go after, and then focus on execution that way. I think there's many tactics or strategies that you can go for, or channels that you can go for. Two of the biggest ones that I'm seeing right now in terms of building out that brand awareness is content marketing and B2B influencers. I know influencers have always been a thing in the e-commerce world, but I hate to break it for anybody who doesn't know this, but if you look on LinkedIn, if somebody's talking about a product and they have a lot of followers, there's a great chance they got paid for that post. And then they're getting some sort of revenue from that way. So those two areas, very, very vital. But I think it starts before I continue on with voice of customer and dialing in there.
Okay, so I want to go through all three of these sequentially. Let's start with voice of customer. And you're saying like reach out and speak to people, and reaching out. And I think a lot of folks, maybe they do questionnaires that they send out to people. Maybe they ask people if they're happy with the service, but it's not that, right? I found, much to my dismay at the beginning, that the customer actually doesn't know the answer. Like if you say to the customers, do you like my product? Yes or no. Well, we just invented something brand new that's never existed before. So they don't really know if they like it or not. That's too binary for them to be able to deal with. So it becomes more about like asking them questions which are less directed at, am I doing a good job or a bad job? And more directed at, so tell me what your day looks like previous to using this. Tell me what your sales look like previous to using this. Tell me how your people were engaging previous to using. Like everything ties into trying to understand what that transformative change is. Tips, first of all, on how people should approach this process, because it's very nuanced. It's actually quite complicated to make it this simple.
Yeah, and I would love your feedback on this, because as I shared, I'm in the process of building a software. So I'm leveraging BrighterClick, my agency, to help drive the marketing for the software. We started out by creating a list of potential customer job titles that we believe would be purchasers. So we're doing marketing analytics. So we're going to have agency side and brand side. We're going to be focusing on the agency side most for certain reasons. We created 3 categories of agencies by headcount. So 1 to, I can't remember what they were, 1 to 10, 11 to 25, and something like that. And then we created job titles within each of those, because different size agencies have different job titles and decision makers. And then we decided on 4 to 5 job titles that we wanted to go after. And we started looking at questions that we would ask each job title. So to your example, I mean, I'm looking at the list of questions that we were asking here, that we are asking, and we're changing these as we go because we're getting insights from these calls. But who's responsible for finding and approving software solutions within the agency? Do you trust AI to give insights and recommendations for ad creative strategy and optimizations? How do you organize your creative tests? So we're asking very, very specific questions to understand how they would use the tool, but also questions like what would make you choose a software versus just using in-platform data, so we can understand why they would be making the purchase or searching for this type of software as well that way. So those are the key types of questions that we're going for there. And then we're looking in LinkedIn Sales Navigator, because we're pre-product. We're not even pre-revenue. We're pre-product, so we have no customers. We're looking at our network. We're creating a list of people, and we're just doing outreach and seeing if they'll hop on a call to talk to them. Oh, I lost your audio again.
Sorry. It's really powerful. And because what you're doing is you're combining closed questions with open questions. So the closed questions of just tell me yes or no, what your belief is. And that can evolve over time, because people will change their answers on those closed questions as you start building it up. And then the second part of it is the open questions, which is just allowing them to talk, because that part of it is far less, because they don't know the answers. Like, that's the real truth. Like, if you say to me, Brian, would you like to get, better companies to invest in? Yeah. And Brian, do you believe that the pipeline that you're receiving right now for startups to invest in is the best pipeline? Like, I genuinely don't know, right?
Mm.
And so to actually get me to speak to what is the process, and saying, well, Brian, how many of, like, the close question is like, how many applications are you getting through every single month, right? Of the companies that are getting through, talk to me about some of the biggest frustrations that you have in those initial conversations. And then what's going to happen is you're going to make me start thinking, well, hold on a sec, let me just think now. So I had that one there, that was really bad because that company, they didn't really have a developed product, they had no route to market. And so over time, what'll happen is I'll start to help build a narrative that helps you understand, like, who's your best accelerator to sell a product to. It could be the same. I remember a guy was telling me a CRM system, which was specifically for VCs and accelerators. And the system was really, this is great for VCs and accelerators. You should do it. You should go after it. And there was no questioning and understanding. While the real reality is that most VCs and accelerators have got all these different processes and ways of thinking. Most people are like highly actually unstructured in how they build these things together. And so it's speaking to what the outcome of that is. Like, so for me, everything in brand is like transformative impact. And that transformative impact means we have to measure from like a feeling or a sentiment or a reality, and at least in the customer's mind, of today versus that sentiment of where they are in the future. Then I think then the branding then just becomes about really amplifying that. So it's repeated back to people so they can see it. But I think those questions are great. And I actually don't think there's any right or wrong answers with questions. The only thing where it hurts, if I do take one of the few things from Lean Startup that I like, is the whole 5 whys that they took from the Japanese thing, which is like, well, so tell me about what you're looking to do. Well, I'd like to save money. Well, why do you want to save money? Well, because we want to be able to allocate more money into revenue. Well, why do you want to allocate more money into sales? Well, because our conversion is going up in sales, and if we had more budget to put into it, then that would be able to drive it further. Well, what? And then you like go through the 5 whys and you get to the bottom line of, oh, you just launched a brand new product and you think this thing is going to be killer, and this product is what you want to focus on, and being over here is pulling you away from it. And so I think that's really the greatest rule. The greatest rule is like maybe 3 rules. Number 1 is you have to have this process, guys and gals, you have to. You can't just have a process of building something out based on assumptions. Your process has to be, and I don't, what do you think the percentage of time spent engaging with the customer and asking them questions versus producing at the start?
That's a good question. I am not a technical founder, so I'm not as involved in the actual dev work. I have a great team behind that. I mean, if I'm going to throw a number out there, 25 to 30% is at least where I would want to be in terms of talking to customers, because you're not just getting questions answered. You're not just determining your product roadmap and your marketing. You're also building relationships for future contracts and for future deals as well. But what's your thoughts there?
I'm the same. I'm exactly the same. I think about it actually for our cohorts, our portfolios, our companies. And at the beginning, I would just send out emails, or we would send out emails, which would just be, what was your revenue? What did you achieve? But now it's not that. Now the revenue is just a door opener to understanding what are the areas of pain that founders are facing, so that we can build a product that can actually evolve, which as that pain evolves. Like, it's actually really cool. It's almost like our Trojan horse is saying, what was your revenue last quarter? You have to tell us because we invested in you. But that's just our Trojan horse. What we then want to say is, go on, tell us about it. What happened? Fire people, hire people, people left you, people deserted you, people tried to destroy your company tried to destroy your company, your customers hated you, you couldn't find customers. Oh, you couldn't find them. Where did you look for customers? So it all becomes around this research to try and do it. And so, and it becomes absolutely vital to me, because every single day I'm smarter about the product that needs to be provided to founders to help them be able to grow their business. So no, I love the percentage that you're saying there.
Yeah, and I think you said something very good as well, as not building based off of assumptions. I own a marketing agency. We specialize in the service that needs the software that I'm building. But I realize that we are just one small agency in the blip of all the agencies out there. And so as we're interviewing other agencies, owners, head of operations, media buyers, creative strategists, there's features, there's aspects of our tool that we've had, because we currently use like a homemade version with Google Sheets and automations and things that we use every day and we think are great features. But if somebody's coming from not using anything to our tool, there's likely some features that I'm not going to say they're not ready for, but they don't need right now. As you were mentioning, trying to figure out the pain points, these questions that we're asking help understand what's the immediate job to be done, what's the immediate problem to solve. That is going to be one of the forefronts of our messaging. And then the additional features that we know are going to help can be complementary as we bring that in or bring people in and get them on board there.
So I love that as like the first point. Everybody listening, spend 25% of all day, every day, engaging with prospects and customers, trying to find out how their lives can be most transformed. You notice I didn't mention your product and I didn't mention your company. Engage with your potential prospects and customers to see how their lives can be most transformed with something that you can be involved with. And Colby, when we used to, at the very beginning in Expert Dojo, we would say, well, as a founder, you need to have Horizon 1, 2, and 3. And Horizon 1 is you're working out what that awesome growth loop looks like around your product. And Horizon 2 is you're building great systems around it. And Horizon 3 is like that self-driving car, which was unimaginable from the beginning, but you're working it out at the very start. After a while, I realized actually you can't work out Horizon 3 at the beginning. You just don't know. If you do, it's either arrogance or foolishness, or you're selling yourself short, because what you find out in Horizon 1 will allow you to understand what the true Horizon 3 actually really is. So that Horizon 1, that first year, 2 years, 3 years, however long it takes you to get that growth loop in place, that is the time where you desperately are asking every single question you can, because if you don't have that monster Horizon 3 change the world product at the end of it, then you're dead. And at the beginning, you only have like 5% of a product, 10% of a product. You don't know how people are going to react. So I love that. Take me to content marketing. So you brought up, I haven't heard content marketing mentioned in a little while. And it's a tremendously important thing. And I don't know why people don't really speak about it or dig into it in much detail. When you think of content marketing, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, for simplest sake, and then I'll kind of expand on it. For anybody that wants to look into a little bit more, look at the companies like ClickUp that have been in the B2B software space that just really focused on building out content engines, or I always mispronounce the name, but Cognism. They're a great example as well. Teams that really focus on taking a strategy to look at how they can build out one piece of content in one area. So let's say you're looking at doing a podcast, for example. How can we then redistribute that one piece of effort across multiple channels in multiple different forms? So taking your full podcast episode and turning it into clips for organic social or blog articles or newsletters that way. That's one form of it. And that is kind of like the thought leadership, the opinion-led type content. And that's very important. It's also very common in the B2B space. I think the way that the B2B world is going to be going in 2025 and years to come as well is content creator-led content. So having people that make like what looks like comedy videos or just content that entertains people, not just educates them. And then also some lower or higher production content as well, which ClickUp has done. So, I mean, looking at, as you were saying earlier, not focusing on the product, focusing on the customer, focusing on the industry, and making content that's relative towards that, I think is going to be important. So not just thought leadership and education, but entertainment content as well.
And so we have in content, like this live stream, this is content, right? So we chop this up, this live stream will go onto LinkedIn. Now we have an engagement with an audience whereby they can hear really relevant things on content as well, but also a new audience. There's zero extra effort for that, zero. Like we're talking here anyway, we're engaging with the folks that are our Expert Dojo people. And so to put it onto LinkedIn is really easy. It also goes onto Facebook. and it also goes onto our website and gets held and for forever to come, which sits there as content marketing. And so I think a lot of the time, especially for non-technical founders, people get confused, stroke, terrified at what they see as what's happening in the world. And they're like, there's so many things in so many areas. And we've got TikTok and we've got all these areas here. But you need a strategy, right? And you need a strategy which is specifically to your people. And your strategy for something like a liquid death is going to be very different from your strategy for a ClickUp, right? Because one is going to be more educational and the other one is going to be more fun, irreverent, out there at the coolest events. How do you put together a content marketing strategy, and how much time would you spend on that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll go a little bit higher level and then go into the content marketing. I think building out a marketing strategy for a software company can really depend on the annual contract value and just understanding what makes sense for the business to be profitable that way. If your product is $49.99 a month, sponsoring a booth at a major trade show, probably not something you want to do because you're going to have a really hard time recouping that $100,000, $250,000 that way. So we would look at it in terms of that, what's going to be fast, what's going to be scalable, and what's the cost of everything, and where can we fit things in within their annual contract value. Content marketing, generally something that works for companies that have a lower annual contract value. It works for any, but could definitely work for the lower annual contract value. We will focus on, once again, voice of customer. I can't say that enough. Understanding the common things within the industry, and then building out content pillars. So what are the 1 to 2, 2 to 3 things that you really want to be known for in your industry? For me, with the software that I'm building, it's data analytics, it's agency workflow productivity, and it's going to be creative strategy, right? So those are the top pillars that I want to be known for. What are different types of content that we can create for each of those? So it may be that we want to do a podcast series on agency analytics or a podcast series on productivity within workflows, and see which one resonates best and which one gets the best engagement and traction that way, and then how we can feed that down. After we've built out our content pillars, we'll start looking at SEO keyword research because we want to make sure that we're going to get discovered with everything. So we'll look at keywords within each of those pillars and use that as a way to focus on what can be the specific topics, questions, or concerns within each episode of our podcast that we're building out.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what you've got me also thinking as well is thinking about content, it flows downstream and it flows upstream. So as you're looking to build, what Colby's said there is, like, first of all, there's the creative part of it. Now, are there people in the world who are unbelievably creative and brilliant who Colby would like to build relationships with? Yes, in a monster way, right? Same thing with me, right? That's why I'm on this with Colby rather than just a lot of this information. I've had the pleasure of being around Colby for years. And so I could come on and say, hey, I want to talk to you about content marketing, and this is what I learned from Colby, but then I would miss this, right? So it flows both ways. The great thing about building content marketing is you do like really one overall thing, but then you have two huge benefits. The overall thing that you're doing is you're building your domain expertise, right? People will know you for what you know, exactly what Colby just said there, right? That domain expertise will then, the next step is to get to domain dominance, which is a beautiful place. That's when you become like the Gary Vaynerchuk of thing, but you're not going to go there straight away, right? You have to have your domain expertise first. If we actually use Gary as an example, remember when he started on YouTube, which was a nascent social media channel at the time. And he started talking about wine in a very irreverent way. He started like, he would pee into a glass and he'd be saying, this is a wonderful Pinot Noir where we're going to talk. And people really liked that because they felt that the sommeliers at the time were speaking at such a high level that they made people look silly. Gary made ordinary people feel smart. And then he helped them learn about wine as well. So he layered in excellence. So that piece is super important. The other two pieces, what you're saying there is like, you then build up all those people above you who you wouldn't normally be able to build a relationship with. And then all that information goes down and it's like 3 times more valuable.
100%. Yeah. And it's those relationships that can often get overlooked. And, you know, when it comes to brand marketing, I see somebody or content marketing. I see somebody just put in the chat, what are the key metrics? There's definitely some metrics that we could talk about, but there's a lot of untrackable things that come with content marketing. And, there's the debates between lead generation and demand generation. There's a lot of untrackable things that come with building demand. And you just have to buy in enough to the strategy to understand that you're not going to be able to track everything. You need to look at stuff from a blended approach, and then understand that those relationships, those partnerships that you're building with people as you're doing content marketing are equally, if not more valuable than likes on a post or shares on a post and things like that.
It's interesting you say that. It's almost like in some ways, because this is such a difficult question to answer because you have so many different marketing channels which take longer or less time to get to the end user. Like content marketing is going to take far longer to get to your end user than paid marketing through Google, for example. However, paid marketing through Google without content marketing or other assists is probably going to be too expensive to get you what you need to be able to get from it. And it's not going to build the loyalty that content marketing is going to do. So like I could, on my analogy, I could either use relationships or I could use jobs. Let's use jobs so we give relationships a break for a second. But you go for a job interview, right? You see a job interview on LinkedIn, you go in for the job interview, you do 20 job interviews because you've applied to like 500 posts. Or you hear that Warren Buffett is going to be speaking at an event which is in the next city from yours that afternoon. And you take a 4-hour car ride to go and actually just get 2 minutes with Warren Buffett afterwards to explain to him how incredible you are, how strong you are, how much you admire him, how much you believe he's the greatest investment person in the world, and you have the ability to do it, and you come from the same background, and Warren, just remember my name. And then 3 weeks later, you send him a direct tweet on X. And that tweet is like, hey, Warren, I really enjoyed seeing you. It was such a pleasure. You're an inspiration to my life. Let me just share with you things that I know. And after time, and so you then fast forward this and you do it 5 or 6 times with different people. That relationship building with Warren Buffett or the 5 Warren Buffetts may end up in nothing, but they also may end up in the most incredible job that you've ever had in your entire life, which lifts you to a life you could never have had versus LinkedIn. What is the answer? It's actually both. Right? The answer isn't one or the other. Most people are looking for the quick answer. Do Facebook ads, do as many as we can. What's wrong with our advertising people? Message isn't resonating. Do better ads with different messaging. And then just this flywheel starts to happen, which leads nowhere. What I really like about what you're saying about building the content marketing is you build this loyalty base inside the organization where people will talk about you. Like Sunil, I love seeing him here on the live stream, but Sunil might be over in India and he might be chatting to a couple of friends of his. And he's like, oh, I was on this live stream and I picked up this really thing from the Expert Dojo. And now another person has heard about Expert Dojo. Another person has heard about you that wouldn't have heard about it before. It may take 3 years for that to turn into something, but you cannot ignore it. So I have this underlining of what you've said on this, Colby, which is everybody has to do content marketing. You don't have a choice. If you do brand, which you have to do content marketing. You can't just skip directly from building a brand, asking all those questions, working on that, to go straight to just pay to advertise to people in front of them. Business doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And if you go straight to paid, and I own an agency that focuses on paid media. So coming from me, if you go straight to paid, you probably don't know your messaging that well, right? So you're going to waste a lot of ad spend trying to figure that out. Content marketing helps you dial in your messaging at a much lower cost. And as we're looking at metrics and things like that, deals don't get closed or decided on LinkedIn. Yes, you might be able to, open the door with somebody, get a conversation, but deals happen when people are sharing your content within their team Slack channel or talking about your brand or your team within their boardroom from some content they've seen, from some insights they've heard, and then using that to help prove their point or to help push to get your product sold. So I think that content marketing, very important. One key thing I will add in, and I see this oftentimes with B2B and B2C companies, but it's very easy to lump a lot of things into the term marketing that way. If you are pre-revenue, or if you are trying to get your first 100 customers or your first 1,000 customers, yes, content marketing, very important. Is your priority right now, are you looking for content, or are you looking for sales? Are you trying to get people and you have a 3-month runway, or you're going to have to close the doors? You probably need to be knocking on doors and doing cold outreach and getting things going and putting forth a lot more effort that way. So don't mix up sales efforts and marketing efforts and say that things aren't working and you're not moving fast enough because content marketing is not getting you the deals. It's a way to help perpetuate what you're doing with sales and other marketing channels.
And it's a conversation, right?
Yeah.
It's a conversation. You have to engage with your community, and the base way to engage with the community is to start having something to say. And when you have something to say, then you're in a position to listen to other people about what they have to say, and then that's going to create content. And just before we move on to influencers, examples of content marketing: a podcast. We did a podcast at the very beginning at Expert Dojo, got engaged and involved with tons of later stage investors, which was an absolute blessing to us. I would never have got access to those investors, those co-investors at the beginning, if we hadn't have done podcasts. Live stream like we're doing right now. Talk to us about like how you see time changing things like blogs versus PR. And I bring up PR very specifically as well, because it used to be so awesome, and I'm kind of struggling with where it goes. Blogs, they used to be so good for page ranking, but now there's so many of them. The media articles like Forbes, it used to be that Forbes was this name brand of pride, but now like any 14-year-old can get themselves onto one of the 5 million contributors to Forbes. So when you look at all of these different, like maybe list a few of them out, what do you see happening to them individually, and which ones are you kind of favoring now?
Yeah, so there's definitely organic social content, right? Which can feed from your blog, feed from your podcast, from your live stream that way. I think that one that is starting to take ranking from things like Forbes contributor articles and just from your own website is websites like Reddit. So doing content marketing within Reddit channels that are relative, or subreddits that are relative to your industry, very important, because Reddit ranks very high with SEO there as well. I think that you may not see as much traffic as you used to with blog articles, but as long as you are creating content that actually answers your customers' questions and is stuff that they want to read and engage with, you can still see some good performance with blog content that way as well. But I think a lot of people are moving towards staying on platform, and the algorithms on channels like LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok want you to stay on platform as well. So I think figuring out how you can create native content towards those platforms, very helpful. But like I said, Reddit, I'm a big fan on Reddit, really bullish there. So I think trying to drive that would be helpful.
Interesting. And so when you say there, you go in, you find the groups which are super relevant to you, and then on those groups, you're linking in your website and just continually to mention it as much as you can, or how do you make sure that it ties back to
where you can? People on Reddit will drag you through the mud very quickly if you come off too salesy. So it's really giving value, answering questions, giving people educational stuff. And if you're wanting to link to your blog article or something like that, you better bury that within 5, 6, 7 different paragraphs of you explaining stuff to them, and make sure it doesn't come off as Chat GPT written. But just engaging with the community and understanding how you can provide value there. I've spoken on my podcast with a D2C brand owner that focuses on shaving products. He's run 0 ads. He cannot crack email marketing. All of his revenue for his 7-figure brand comes through his efforts on Reddit and engagement in those subreddit communities that way.
Interesting. And so when you look at Reddit, because obviously they were so powerful for GameStop, like look what happened there. GameStop went from like a nothing dead company to be like a company that could do pretty much anything that they wanted to. AMC also had like a huge run on Reddit as well. They had like a massive group that were saving AMC. So we know that like the community there is incredibly strong. So really when you're looking at content marketing, it kind of seems that you're veering more and more towards building community, whether it be on Reddit, whether it be on Telegram, whether it be on WhatsApp or Signal, or one of the areas that large groups of people within your space are gathering.
I think that's definitely a goal, as to how can you capture people that way.
Okay, very good. And then so let's move on then to the influencers. So how valuable are influencers for you today, right? You've got your content marketing, people know what you do. Like, let's take an expert dojo. We built our content marketing, we have all of our training, we have everything there, everything's nicely logged back to the website. What do we do then to make sure that the right influencers are pushing us out? And it's all paid, I'm guessing.
Mostly, yes. Influencers, I've seen two models. One is paying per post, which is very common. One that I've heard of in the software space as well, if someone has enough authority, is actually building out some sort of micro equity involvement with an influencer just so they can help push that way. Um, Finding the right people is really understanding, who your customers are keeping up with on LinkedIn, on their subreddits, on their communities, their live chats, whatever it may be that they're doing that way. I think influencers are the new top of funnel for discovery. Out of all the ICP customers that or ICP interviews that we've done, and we're going to keep doing, it surprised me. A few of them have said that they don't necessarily trust Google anymore for finding new products. One of our questions is, where do you find new products? Most of them have said, actually all of them have said so far, that they rely on word of mouth. And when I drilled into that a little bit more, they said that they do keep up with thought leaders on Twitter, on LinkedIn, to understand what products they're talking about, and will generally then share that post with someone in their team so that they can start doing some investigation on that. So it's pretty interesting to see that people are, word of mouth has always been a thing, right? But the B2B space is really doubling down on influencers going forward.
And tips to find influencers, who'd you go after? Because look, we know, and by the way, from also influencers B2C and B2B. B2C, like, we know is great. Ryan Reynolds, look what he did. Conor McGregor, I mean, anyone who could turn that garbage whiskey into anything that somebody would pay more than $10 for is a genius. So but actually, funny enough, on the same point with Conor McGregor, like, Conor McGregor is hated now in Ireland because he had a sexual assault. Not even allegedly, I think he was convicted. But he had a sexual assault with a young lady over in Ireland. So now he's gone from being like kind of semi-loved in awesome celebrity to being a douchebag. And so you have a danger with these celebrities. Same thing happened with Will Smith. Look, we had Will Smith, who was like an amazing celebrity for one of our brands. And then that incident happened in the Oscars, and even like, I actually thought he was okay on what he did. Like, it wasn't a bad thing. Like, bloke said something really bad. One of the two then went up there and slapped him. Like, that's okay. But the audience didn't feel that way. The public didn't feel that way. And it meant anything that he was associated with for 18 months was dead. And so how do you go after influencers? What's the best way to engage with these people? Because I think everybody listening to this has probably gone through the experience of, especially top level celebrities, outreaching to 100 people and nobody replying.
Yeah. So we'll use different tools. I'll go and tell you, most everybody, I believe, that's probably listening to this has used ChatGPT before. Ask ChatGPT to find people that are influencers of a certain niche on YouTube, on LinkedIn. You will, of course, have to go through and look to see if they have the proper follower to engagement rate percentage that you're looking for. One other thing that we have done, we use SEMrush for our SEO efforts. We'll do backlink analysis of our competitors to understand where they're getting backlinks from, and look to see which backlinks are coming from podcasts or from newsletters or from websites that are influencers that way. So we can see who they've engaged with. And then the third, which, I can't necessarily help any listeners with this if they're not, but we are our ideal customer, or part of our ideal customer profile, because we are an agency. So we just naturally have kept up with influencers in the space because that's the type of content that we consume. So we've just seen who's performing well and who's not that way. There's a little bit of a benefit with the B2B side versus the B2C side of influencers, because more often than not, just because somebody's an influencer in B2B does not mean the common person knows who they are. They're a lot less famous than a Will Smith or a Conor McGregor that way. So the backlash, not necessarily as bad. When it comes to outreaching to them, we will likely reach out to them on multiple channels. So we'll try to start with cold emailing or DMing them. If we have not already tried to get them on the podcast, getting them on the podcast is our first pathway so that we can build that connection and build that communication there. But if we don't have the bandwidth or the time to do that, we'll look at cold emailing or cold DMing. and then using a LinkedIn scraper tool and trying to get their phone number and reaching out to them that way as well. If none of those work, always look for secondary connections as well. So who do we know that knows them and who can make that introduction to us as well?
I actually literally I'm just thinking about what you just said there. I had somebody reach out to me yesterday and say, "Do you know such and such? They're your first connection in LinkedIn." I was like, "No," because
Yeah, we won't go that way. We'll reach out to that connection and see if they'll connect us through
yeah.
that.
But I was like, if I know the guy, if we're connected, I'll happily make the connection. But it turned
Yeah.
out he was the head of marketing or the head of content or the manager or something for a huge personality that these people were trying to get through to.
Gotcha.
So you don't always have to go through. That's what I love about what you've just said there. You don't have to go through the front door all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What you have to do, going back to the Warren Buffett example, you want to make sure you're in front of these people. And there's normally like a small group of very trusted confidants that are around them at the beginning. If you can get directly through to those people, like that's huge. If you can get through to people who are selling with them, working with them, partnering with them, are a service provider to them, that's huge. Because what you'll do is you'll then build up an affiliate. I've had people who, like, we're very close with one of the large crypto exchanges, and somebody came and they're like, "Brian, hey, if you can connect this and we can get a naming rights on this, then we'll make sure that we give you a commission for these people doing this thing here." And we're like, "Okay, that's super interesting," because there's a benefit. So you can approach pretty much anybody. There's very, very few people that you can't get to, as long as you're prepared to do the work to go in. And Colby mentioned SEM Rush, SEM Rush or SEO Rush. I can never remember.
SEM Rush.
Yep. SEM Rush, yeah. And also you've got tools like Apollo, Hunter.io, which are really good for scraping tools to be able to get email addresses, phone numbers, and other areas as well. And what I really like about just towards the end of this, of pulling this back to an area where it all comes together. Like we talked about when I said to Colby at the start, like, what are the most important things as far as building it? He actually talked through the entire funnel. He talked through the beginning area, which is don't start reaching out to people or speaking to people or having a voice until you understand what your voice is. Understand what your voice is. Speak to your customer. Spend 25% of time actually really understanding who those customers are going to be. And the customers are not just the people who are going to buy. They're the third parties who are engaged. They're the people who sell products already. They're the people in the industry. They're the industry leaders. They're the people who've retired out of the industry. Every 2 ears, 1 mouth, every single minute of every single day should be about you digging deeper and deeper and deeper to what that horrible, nasty, filthy, dirty enemy is, so that you can work. And that enemy to the consumer, so you can work on your transformative product. And I love that. And then you came and you're like, no, don't just go straight to like paid marketing. Build content. Now that you've gone to such trouble to find out what your consumer voice is, what your consumer voice actually is, now speak to them in a voice that they'll actually understand, that aligns with that voice that they have. And then my top of the funnel for like how to actually get more people buying stuff is through influencers. Here's how you go to influencers. Cisco asked here, how do you define as content marketing? Blogs, AM posts are everything. I know Cisco well. Cisco has got outsourcing for recruitment. So if you're looking to try and build up a recruitment team, why would you pay like 3 times the price or 5 times the price for highly paid people that are in an area, when you have these incredible people that are in Latin America that you can build out a team and you can curate it, put it together, build it, and do it for like a fraction of the price? That's what he does. So in that context, and that, and he's asking, what do you define as content marketing? How would you like pull this all together for him?
Yeah, I think content that people actively want to consume that is actually relevant to the things that they are searching for, talking about, or trying to figure out or solve within their business. I think that is content that really resonates. The channel, the medium, the strategy you go about it is going to be different for every business. It's going to be different for every vertical. You need to find where your customers are and figure out what type of content you put out for them on that channel.
Yeah, and maybe like in his case, he's in recruitment, he's in creating teams, he's in technology. So he's in creating teams around technologists that are going to be able to give it better. So maybe his content, they might even be small bites on X, where you're putting like 3 lines of this team built out a company that was worth $1 billion for only $500,000 over 3 years. Interested to know how they did it? Click here, and then you tease people, let people go through a journey with you. Don't be just pummeling them with 5,000 paragraphs of stuff they're never going to read. Allow them to take control. What were you going to say, Colby?
And if I'm understanding what he does correctly, it's building dev teams. So so I'm a non-technical founder. If I am your buyer persona, then one thing that I'm curious about is, we might potentially do that in the future. Right now I have US-based seasoned developers, but what questions do I ask when I'm trying to find the right people? What interview questions do I need to go after? How do I source somebody for a topic or a service that I don't have expertise in? That's a very top of funnel type thing. You know what I mean? So, once again, interviewing your customers and understanding what pain points they have, because that would be a blocker for me from using a service like yours.
Exactly. You got to build up the trust and get it going. So you got to follow this thing through. But I love that we finished with influencers. Colby, finish us off with, first of all, please, information on how anybody can contact you as well to speak with it. And then I give you the last word to all of the entrepreneurs who are listening to this now and all of the future entrepreneurs who are going to be listening through all of the content marketing which will be put out there. They're out there. They understand voice. They understand content. They understand then use influencers to hammer it home. Pull it all together with your big advice. But please give your email and contact details first.
Yeah, so my email address, colby@brighterclick.com. Feel free to reach out to me there, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Colby Flood, or listening to the Marketing Mindset podcast on all your major platforms. If I had to summarize what we talked about today, it would really go back to the importance in 2025 and forward of focusing on building out brand for your software or for your B2B company. If you're listening to this later, or if you're listening to this now, go back and rewatch it later. There was multiple times where we were referencing ideas for things. One specific earlier, Brian said, you can use your hunter.ios, you can use your this or that. He wasn't saying you can use data scraping tool. He was saying you can use specific brand name tool that way, because they've done a very good job at positioning themselves as one of the leaders in that vertical or in that category that way. Focus on how you can long-term put yourself as a category leader, and you will be able to make it through recessions. You'll be able to make it through downturns. You'll be able to make it through all those tough times where sales-led organizations that just focus on using SDRs to get deals today struggle because they don't have a lot of brand awareness when people aren't as active in purchasing.
Thank you, my friend. That is a wrap. As you said at the very beginning, don't have a content plan, have a sales plan that includes the content plan. Everybody go out there, sell stuff, find your customer's voice, build content around that voice, and then go out and hammer it home with a bunch of paid marketing using influencers which are relevant to your particular space and your particular people. Colby, I'll see you soon.